business is growing, there are three things that matter: growth, growth, and growth. And when a business is shrinking, there are three other things that matter: growth, burn, and margin. And I want to suggest to you that preparing your successor has some similar attributes. When your organization is alive, healthy, and expanding in the middle of your leadership tenure, all that typically matters is growth, growth, growth. And then something happens, but as your tenure becomes shorter, the pressure increases. And all then that matters is growth, burn, and margin. You still want to grow, but your burn rate on people is higher and your margins for error are tighter. And whether it's your business stage or your stage in preparing your successor, I want to suggest in a better world, we would be consistently focused on three things: growth, identification, and preparation. And I'll say a little bit more about that. But a few years ago, my father-in-law passed away. And while it was a very difficult time for our family, he gave us a huge gift. He had planned well for that moment. His business affairs were in place, and that made that huge transitional moment so much easier for the rest of us. So I want you to think about this. If you were gone tomorrow, what would still need to get done that you would not be present to execute? If you were gone tomorrow, what would still need to get done that you would not be present to execute? In other words, if you simply disappeared, I know it sounds morbid, but if you actually died, what would no longer get done that needs to get done? And it's a little scary to imagine. If you died tomorrow, what will others have to deal with that you could have planned and prepared them for? And for some of you, the first thing that comes to mind is probably something regarding your finances, or paying your bills, or even knowing where the passwords are for all of your accounts online. For others of you, you're thinking about your business. You likely hold the keys to so many things that are deeply connected in your own mind, but may have never reached the ears of other people. And at the most basic level, my wife has thought about that. So I realized that when she went on a trip in the last year, and before she left, she told me there is a file called "If I Die." And I didn't know this until a year ago. And she said, if anything happens to me, you have most of what you need right there in that file. And if someone had to take, okay, my wife did that. Amazing, right? Some of you are like, I want a person to do that. If someone had to take over your job tomorrow, your whole job, who would do it? And what would they need to know to have the fundamental knowledge to at least get started? And even more, what would they need to develop to do your job, to do it well, and maybe even to do it their own way? And we at WiLD Leaders would suggest that to do succession planning well, you need at least 5 things. You don't write these down because we've done other things. We're going to talk more about these later, but you must get very real about what this is. The first thing, you must get real about what succession planning is really about. You should put, number 2, you should put a succession system in place, a leader, which is quite frankly a leader development system. You also must identify your successor or potential successors, and then you must begin preparing those successors. And the last thing is this: you must get started now. Like, people ask me, like, when should I start developing successors? And I'm like, as soon as you became a leader. And so they're like, I'm behind, I got to get going. Succession planning doesn't start the moment that you start thinking about retirement. It starts the moment you begin leading. I think that's one of the big takeaways. And today we're focusing on the 4th step: preparing the successors you've identified. That's all set up, you all. I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the WiLD Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. And there was a season in my life where I had a bit of anxiety about when I would fly. And so I was anxious. I wasn't anxious about dying from a plane crash, but about the implications of dying on the people I care about in my family and our business. And on a couple of trips, I even sent a quick text to my wife saying, if anything happens to me, Daniel knows how to run the business. Like, I was like, just because she's not in our business every day, I'm like, he's got this. Like, he's ready to go. And I said, and I think I also said to her, if you decide at some point to sell the business down the road, here's how I would value it, because the IP alone will be worth quite a bit on the open market. But again, most importantly, Daniel and the rest of the team can run the business well, so don't worry about selling. That's a lot, but it was like, I'm like, blah, 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 like as the plane's taking off and I'm about to lose signal, this is what Rob does. So I don't do this anymore, but because I think she knows now. But to be clear, neither my wife's in case I die folder, nor my in case my plane goes down text are succession planning systems and are far removed from what it means to intentionally prepare your successor. The intentional preparation of your successor includes some important things. The identification of a successor or potential successors. That's the first thing. The second thing is that thinking about their current state and future developmental state related to your organization's past, present, and future. Where are they? Where have they been? Where are they going? Where has your organization been? Where is it? Where is it going? That's important. And then putting a process of development in place for that person or people that's based on the best science and practice of developing a human being to take your place. And if you're thinking about your organization, this person may be either on your team already or someone on the outside that you see as that successor. And I know some of you are thinking, I don't know who that person is yet, but I'm gonna invite you to think about who that person is. I don't care if you are an independent, you don't have a larger organization and a team. If you're working alone, I think it's important to think about this. While it might be easier to just think of a successor as a robotic cog in a machine that will just be wired into your role and start to function, the reality is that your successor is a human being. Like, right, still to this day, can I have a nod? Like, it's a human being still, right? At this point. This is a person with their own desires, motivations, strengths, limitations, personality, experiences, fears, and hesitations, financial limitations or opportunities, character flaws and strengths, and likely their own family with all the other complex variables that come with that. So Rob, thanks. You just made it all really complex. But that's who we're talking about, as a person, right? And if you have not already, I want you to imagine the person or people who would most effectively step into your shoes tomorrow. And for those of you helping others develop successors, my hope is that this framework for preparing them might help as well. So I want you to begin. Let's start to think about this. I'm going to give you some three handholds. I got a lot of lists today, but here's three things as you begin to identify a person, because I want you to begin to think about a person. What I'm going to say toward the end of this will have a lot more teeth if you actually write down the name of a person. And by the way, no one's looking over your shoulder, so this person doesn't get a text saying, oh my gosh, so-and-so just wrote my name down, or someone else, or no one else is looking at it going, hey, why didn't they write my name down? This is just to you, okay? So I want you to think about a person. But here's a way to begin to identify this person. Three things to think about regarding identifying a successor. And this is a little bit along the lines of how would you select a successor before you start to prepare them? All right, the first thing is ability. And ability is the fundamental competence to carry out the functions of your job as it is today or as it will be tomorrow. Now, I'm not saying that they have the ability now, but they have the fundamental starting place. They have some of the ability of what it's going to take to do this. We'll get to the rest in a second, my other 2 points. And here's the thing. You also have to remain open to the possibility that your successor may bring skills beyond your own or different than your own that may take your organization to new levels of effectiveness and impact. Whatever, or if it's not your organization, your movement, what your impact, your mission into a whole nother level, they may bring something different. The second thing is this: readiness. Readiness. So if the first thing is ability, the second thing is readiness. Readiness is the willingness to edit and to learn, to take feedback, and the belief that they could actually learn and change. A successor who is not willing to learn and change is going to be a problem. Just as much as your unwillingness to learn and change is likely a current problem. By the way, y'all, when I'm pointing fingers, I got a lot of fingers pointing back at me, so I get this, right? So, but it's like, this is the reality, right? If we're not aware that we're not willing to change, that's problematic for people. They will have to learn new competencies and skills and gain knowledge they don't have. And so that wide openness to learning is going to be important. So they must be hungry to learn and likely to learn from you. So readiness is also key. I would also say this: desire. The third thing is desire. Desire is the motivation to be your successor. While a reluctance to lead or to fill your shoes is not only natural but desirable, I'm not looking for somebody who's like, I want the job. We're not looking for that person. I think a healthy sense of reluctance is very, very good. A person who goes, man, the stakes in this feel high. So they're realistic about what's coming, because you already know it's tough, right? So we want people that are coming into this realistically. So, but reluctance is different from a lack of desire. Does this person feel the motivation to lead in your shoes after you were gone? On some level, they have to want it. On some little bit of level, they have to desire this. And I would say this, that we talk a lot about this thing called a sigmoid curve, and I'm not going to get deep into that, but I would say this, that even moving into identifying people that would be your successors, a successor or your successors, it's a tough process, because it's a big change process. So it requires us to, even into the possibility that things may feel like they're getting worse before they get better, especially when you identify someone, you start to develop them. Development is a difficult process. And we've seen that over and over and over again. So here's what I'd like you to do. Think of a person who has enough of those three. Can you write the name of a person down? Ability, readiness, and desire, or the potential for those three. Okay? Who is this person? Take a moment and just write down their name. Everything I'm about to say next will be, I think, more effective if you do. So let's talk about preparing this person. Everybody, so you got one. We've got a person, all right? We even made a stretch for some of you. We've got somebody, though. So let's talk about preparing them. Preparing your successor is a process of experiential testing, assessment, feedback, and more testing. It will require moments to experiment, moments to assess growth and areas for continued growth. It will require feedback and repeated experiential testing. And the experiential playground it's the actual moments of trying to lead in your shoes. And the assessment is the process of increasing self and other awareness, and feedback is the developmental mechanism through which they will experience, learn, assess, and talk about it. So what I'm saying is that there's going to be this, like, we're going to give people experiences that will help them develop competence in a deeper sense of efficacy, and give them a way to assess, to actually systematically assess where they are, and then talk about it, to actually have the tough conversations and talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, we are left only to assess a successor, or for them to self-assess based on a blind reliance on the results. If we don't talk about it, all we've got is the results, as the outcomes. And leading well will go so much deeper than simple results. Know this: to effectively develop, I'm so commanding this morning. Know this, everyone. But think about this. I'm not very invitational. I need to be more. What if you thought about this? To effectively develop your successor is to start now, to be fully aware of the context, history, and future of the business or not-for-profit or practice that you run, and maybe most importantly, fully realize that they may do it differently from you, and maybe even better. And if we're honest with ourselves, and not just saying, if you're not just saying, of course, Rob, that will be hard. Of course it'll be hard. If it's not at all hard to imagine them doing the job better than you, that may be something you need to think about more. To develop them well is to prepare them better than you were prepared. Like, that's just crazy to think about. So where do we begin? You have a person in mind, a specific person. And so let's go. As we move into this, put this conversation in the hands, is to put this conversation in their hands and create a rhythm of regular conversations. We often feel that to prepare a successor is to evaluate them, but we are talking about looking with them as opposed to at them. The true integration of performance and feedback and development. And so here's the first thing I would suggest. Evaluate the context. What is the business, the organizational, team, and individual context within which the successor would have to lead? Is the team small or large? How will others on the team perceive them? Will they perceive them as the child of the founder, as an outsider, as someone who may or may not know the business? Will they see them as a peer who suddenly got launched into leadership? The perceptions of the team members can change quickly, but only if the successor continues to develop their own leadership efficacy and fortitude. So I think one of the first points I want to make is just that understanding the organizational context, past, present, and future, Where is it going? As best you can is important. And assessing that with the person you've identified, like talking through what's going on in the context, is super important. So important. The second thing is this: personality and readiness. What are their traits, and are they ready to learn? Are they ready to learn? How are their traits likely to impact others for whom they are responsible? That's what we describe as personality. Are those things important? But I think in terms of readiness, I want to focus on one thing regarding personality and readiness. Have they been invited into the possibility that they may be the one to lead next? You know what I'm saying? Like it changes when you get that invitation, like, and it's not promising it, but it's saying like, I think you may lead here next, and I'd like to begin to prepare you. How do you feel about that? People can't get ready for something they don't know might be coming. And so, by the way, if they want it too bad, that may be something to think about. Like, that's the other problem. We do experience that sometimes. So that's where that reluctance thing comes in. But the fundamental question is this: have they been invited to get ready to learn and to grow? Okay, the next one: calling and purpose. For somebody that's going to sound familiar because you've actually been through our whole development process, but it looks very different when you're thinking about a successor, because I'm asking you to think about them and not you, not just a leadership team, but someone who would take your role. So here's the question: why are they here? What do they perceive they're good at doing, and what do they want? Have they ever asked themselves these questions? If somebody really does not want to succeed you in your organization, that lack of desire or non-desire is going to come out at some point. But I think we shouldn't oversimplify and express lack of desire as also immediately lacking success or potential. Like desire, when people are invited to think about why they're here, desire can quickly change, as a person may feel called to be your successor beyond their desire. Or they may realize they had skill that they didn't know they had. And so this is the question: discovering this with them. Why are they here? What do they perceive they're good at doing, and what do they want? Another one you all know is a big deal for me. This is the next one: presence under pressure. Leadership presence. It is listen to this. It's so funny to think about this. It is short-sighted to assume that just knowing where the passwords are is enough. It's not enough. When it gets difficult, and it will, what is going to be the most challenging for your successor? Developing their leadership or executive presence is investing deeply in providing them feedback on how they show up when they are under stress. As an example, my son Ryan just introduced me in front of 1,500 other students at his university. And I was so proud of my son, and he was so justifiably nervous. Like, this was his first time. Like I said, you're never going to be able to say you've never done this again. And a couple of days later, I asked him, I said, what would you do differently next time? And he said, I would slow down and make intentional pauses. That was one thing. I thought that was kind of cool that he said that. And then he said this, I asked him, I said, would you be less nervous next time? He said, for sure, I'd be less nervous. So when it comes to your successor, what kind of presence could they develop that would help them be more present and composed when the next high pressure moment comes? What do you need to work on in terms of that presence? The next thing is this. I know this is a long list, but I know that they're also getting them in the chat. So experiences. What experiences will they need to normalize? And what I mean by that is so they no longer feel like an imposter, to master leading in your place. What experiences do they need to lead in this place for the future? Do they need to be around other senior leaders? Do they need a project an in-place assignment to lead alone or without you around? Sometimes a WiLD team says, Rob, go on vacation so we can, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's certain things if you step out that they might develop, but thinking intentionally, what experiences will they need to lead in your current or future organizational context? What are the experiences? The next thing is this: skills, knowledge, and competencies. What basic competencies will they need to do your job well? And what specific skills will they need to bring or develop or delegate? And what will they need to know now and in the future? What are those specific kinds of competencies they will need? They might need financial acumen, might need to manage conflict. They might need dealing with problem employees, casting vision, negotiation skills. These are all specific things that you could identify for them that would help them develop into their full capacity. I know I'm going to keep going, y'all. Motivation. Think about this. What activates this person to give their best and become their best? What are the specific motivators for this person that are different from some other successor that would activate this person to give them become their best? It's as simple as that. Like, to begin to discover that, to assess that, to understand it. And then two more things: strategic support. Who must be around this person to do the job well? Do you hear me? Like, who do they have to be surrounded by? Role models, mentors, peers, people who give it to them straight. Those kinds of folks, people whose shoulders they'd cry on if their life and world were falling apart. Their board of advisors we talked about last week, all those things. And then finally, this: investments in others. Preparing your successor is about an ongoing cycle of multiplication. It's not just about preparing the successor, but that they will be a multiplier, that they will begin to learn the skills to develop their own successors now. Because we all know that it could have happened sooner. We know that. So all of these is about what would it mean for us. I gave you a lot to chew on. But as you think about your successor, what I hope is that we elevate a conversation around, so where would you begin? What does this make you think about in terms of what it will mean to develop them and to develop them well? All right, so you got the person in mind. So let's just keep the conversation going.